Welcome to TeaTime with sAw. I'm sitting here with sAw, as the name would imply from the title. You've been listening to this. Regardless, sAw, of course, the coach of G2, once upon a time the coach of ENCE and Heroic, currently in a quest towards the Major very soon as well, but he's got a few other events coming up as well. We're going to talk a little bit about maybe some things from just the current day and age, not just of G2, but of the CS scene in general, and maybe some of the players you've played with before who are being talked about these days. SAw, easy question, first of all. Vitality just won another Grand Slam. These guys do not stop winning. What's it like to be a coach in another team's era?
I mean, in some ways at least, it's motivating, of course, because like now when we were in Rio and we had the match against them, even with standing and everything, but we were also talking about it like we want to break their streak basically. And it is motivating in that way that when someone is like above everyone else, then there's someone to catch up to, like someone you can look into, you will try to counter them. And I think every team is looking at them like, of course, as that team and looking at them like harder than maybe the other teams in that way. So I mean, it's motivating in that way. I wouldn't say it's not really negative in any other way except that you are not in that team yourself, right? So I mean, I think it's a bit whatever in that way. Like your, of course, main focus is still on your own team and everything, but of course, when you have a chance to play them, then you want to give everything and break that streak and break the era if possible. But that's gonna take some more events than just one, of course.
Of course. So I did some coaching, which obviously nowhere near the level as you've been doing. One of the things that I found really frustrating back in the day is that my players would be like, "Oh, look, I've downloaded like the demos of Device and I've downloaded the demos of Glaive and everything, and look, I'm learning what they're doing." And to me, it always felt like, because my players obviously weren't really at that level, you'd miss out more than you actually get. I was sort of wondering. I mean, this is just a personal interest that. Do your players ever do that where they're just like, "Hey, dude, I'm telling you, we need to do this vitality strat. I'm telling you, this is insane." And you're just coming out and saying, maybe not, right? We don't have Zaiwu and we don't have Rops necessarily to make that work.
I mean, of course, like it's natural that you will look the teams who are winning the most, and players as well. But I wouldn't say we have that a lot. Like I would say it's even pretty divided. Like if we take some ideas from other teams, like it's mostly some top 10 teams overall. So it's divided, and I would say even quite evenly in a way, because we do look at everyone just in the top of the scene. But then, of course, like for the players especially, they will much rather watch also demos from top teams than, let's say, top 30, top 40, top 50. Like the more you go down, there's also like then they might have this reaction like, yeah, I don't want to watch this guy because who is he, basically. Even though, of course, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't watch. Like I think you can get a lot of ideas from other people as well. So it can be a bit of ego thing as well. But yeah, of course, it's a natural thing to look at the teams who are winning the most.
So I'm also kind of curious from your perspective, from like anti-stratting and things, coach, right? This is something that a friend of mine said to me a few days ago. I don't know how true it could be or isn't. Is that he thought that some of the top 5 teams are probably more likely to lose to a team like G2 and whatnot because they're so much more fixated on, hey, we have to end this era, we have to beat Vitality, we're gonna have to face them. So maybe they're not able to put in as much prep for like a team like you guys, who obviously are going to be dark horse potential, but right now you're not really like proper contenders. Do you think that's true, or do you think that's just like some random fans saying bullshit because he doesn't know?
Um, like about us ending the era or possibly winning these
About you guys
teams.
maybe getting better matchups versus like say a team like Falcons, because those teams are doing more to just be like, we have to beat Vitality, we have to beat Vitality, we have to beat Vitality.
I don't think so. Like I think, of course, like everyone wants to beat Vitality, but then at the same time, the competition is also like at a really high level. So whether it's us playing NaVi or Furia Falcons, whatever it might be, or them also playing each other, I think it's like everyone approaches the matches the same way. Like in a way, of course, there can be like this extra motivation against Vitality, especially if you haven't beaten them. But then again, there's also these matchups between some other teams where like someone has just beaten the other team like 5 times in a row, and
Yeah.
it's like that specific matchup is a struggle. And also for us, like in G2, I think like we have struggled a lot against like, well, top 10 teams overall. Like our record is not the best. So there's something for us to figure out there. Something just we need to learn and get the experience as a team and everything. And then obviously see also how this Nertz roster change can help us.
Yeah, I'm gonna keep teasing that Nertz roster change for later on because I just wanted to ask some G2 questions, right? Um, I've been watching G2 for obviously a long time now. I started watching CS around 2015, 2016 and whatnot. So G2 for me, in my head, when I think about it, like this is the Carlos Ocelot G2, right? The G2 that wants to go after superstars, the G2 that, is going to sign your Kenny S and Shocks and do that whole move, is going to then sign your, like your Nico and your Monazi and everything like that. You're in a different G2, right? Like the management has obviously changed, the situation in esports has obviously changed. This is still a huge, massive organization, but the direction doesn't seem like you guys are necessarily going to be like, putting in the $2 million bids for like a Kiosuke, for like, whoever that next donk is going to be, that Spirit Academy is somehow going to produce, because we know they do that. What's the team culture like now from this, sort of newer era of G2?
I mean, the team culture, like it's impossible for me to compare to the old times, but I know, of course, like what we want to build is like a team culture, of course, of, well, team play. It's not like, well, I'm not sure if any team would be like, yeah, this guy's our superstar, we will give everything to him, and then you guys, the rest of the guys doesn't mean anything, like whatever's a sacrifice for this guy. But of course, like we want to build a team where we are more even. It doesn't mean at the same time, like if we can get Donk into the team, I mean, it's a no-brainer, right? But there's not so many players like this, so then there's also limited amount of teams who can go for these players, and then when they have their contracts and everything, then that's the situation. So then you gotta build it in a different way. But I do think we have a solid team, like all around. So then you just gotta figure out like how to get the best players for each roles, and for those players to complement each other, and build it more. Of course, also make sure that your team culture, like it's boosting the players individually, so it can be more than the sum of the pieces, basically, in that way. But just to make them shine individually within the system, of course, and providing the structure. So I think it's mostly about that. It's for many teams, I would say, because like I don't think there's many teams who can do these big investments nowadays. Like it's a bit more riskier times in that way. There's not so much money flowing in, I would say, and then it's always gonna be a gamble what kind of roster change you do. And I think lately, like the biggest changes, it's been mainly Falcons, to be honest.
Yeah, we kind of know why that is. But I'm also just sort of curious, and for you, is that when G2 came to you and they were trying to recruit you, you've obviously just come off of Heroic at that point. You've gotten a lot of like very good major runs. I think at the Shanghai Major, you almost made top 4, almost beating G2 by like 3 rounds in overtime for third map. When G2 comes to you, do they come to you and tell you that, hey, you're going to be building this new sort of era of G2, which isn't decided by the big buyouts and the superstars? And that's something you've always sort of been a specialist in. It feels like, be it ENCE or Heroic or whatever, is that nurturing talent. Was that G2's primary pitch to you? Was that why you think that they reached out to you in particular?
I guess in some ways, yes, because like it, of course, you can see how it went in ENCE and in Heroic, and then they were in a situation of losing Nico and Monesi, like them leaving the team, and then it's a rebuild phase, and then they need to think like what kind of approach they want to go for. But then, of course, at the same time, also for me, it was important that I wouldn't just join like a feeder team, and that's not gonna be our goal. Like our goal is still to be the number one. But of course, we need to build it from like where we are. Like we need to look at the situation where we are now and then try to take those steps. And it's not necessarily gonna be fast, but the goal is still to be at the top. That hasn't changed. And I would also say, like, of course, if there is the right opportunity, like to get a player, spend money in that way, like it makes sense, and the risk is not too high compared to the reward possibly, then I would say G2 is willing to do that. But of course, it needs to be calculated. It needs to be something that makes sense, and it's not just done in the heat of the moment in that way. But yeah, the goals remain, and it is for sure a different kind of project in that way. But yeah, I think it's gonna take some time, most likely. But at the same time, so far also like comparing like or thinking about where we started from like 9 months ago, I think it's like right now we are getting to the point also like things are in place. So I would say now it's about some adjustments here and there, and we are not so far off from reaching these playoffs and then potentially making deeper runs from there.
Yeah. So the other thing that's sort of different about G2 and coming onto G2 is that before, be it on Heroic, Big, on Ends, you worked with players who were very clear IGLs, who wanted to be IGLs and who had been IGLs for a while, right? Snappy and Kyxsan are sort of the big two that you worked with. Um, LNZ for a season, yes, maybe a little bit younger, but I'm curious about, you're now working with Hunter as your IGL. How is that experience different? Is it different at all? Because in my head, it's like, hey, now you probably are the one who had, at least in the initial phase, a lot more control over things maybe than you'd want. Maybe that's what you want. Just talk to me about the contrast between Snappy Kyxsan and then Hunter, who's a new IGL.
Yeah, I mean before I hadn't really worked with anyone who wasn't an IGL before, so they had some kind of background on it. But then at the same time, I do think like all these IGLs I have worked with so far, also they have their own like strengths and their weaknesses. So in that way, it's not like much different, I would say. The thing is, of course, like Hunter, he needed to learn a lot, well, in terms of the positions, changing that, then being a bit more sacrificial in that way, being in more in the pack and everything. But then also just the fact that like the biggest difference is that he needs to basically be making decisions every round of the match, or at least have a solution in his head instead of being the secondary voice what he was before. So getting used to that and using like all that brain power in a different way that you can't focus on yourself, that was probably the biggest change. And then like all the small details about knowing your players as well. Um, but like I said, like it's not like all the players have it, even if they have been IGL before. It's not like they have all the qualities instantly. So like with Snappy Kicks and also LNC, like there was different topics I would try to teach them after seeing like kind of okay, this part they are really good at. So maybe I don't need to touch this part so much. But then this part is lacking a bit, so let's try to improve this here. So with Hunter as well, like it might be with many IGLs, it's about knowing your players, how to use them the best. Also knowing their emotions a bit. So are they like now they're really hyped? Now I can use them in a different way. Now they are a bit tilted. Okay, maybe I shouldn't ask for advice, or this is how I need to approach them to get them back into the game. But it's a lot of aspects like this. It in-game leading, as the word says, like it's leading inside the game, but it's like it can be a lot more, and a lot of the times also the captaincy like comes with it, of course. And that's like another side of it where you need to figure out like how much of that you're gonna basically give to the IGL. But I think like Hunter being an experienced player, he has a lot of good things to bring to the other players already from that side. And as an IGL and being a secondary voice, like he has good eye for the game, so he's smart in game. So it's not a problem like that. I think the biggest challenge has been like learning how to be focused like on each round, basically to the calls, and then also remaining balanced between like focusing on being an in-game leader and then focusing on himself, and then while he's focusing on himself, giving like the freedom to the other players and kind of dividing the responsibilities, because that's always going to be a challenge as an in-game leader, that how much you're going to do yourself, how much can you give responsibilities for the other players, and like how much you can balance it within the team. I think it's it's not only for him. Every team is going to be finding this balance of their own depending what kind of players there is in the team, but I think it's mainly these kind of things. from the beginning that we have had.
Um, who are some of the other players who are maybe helping out in the calling and what the game's actually going on, especially in like that maybe some things about emotional regulation, maybe some things about just making sure that you stay in that calling mindset is obviously something newer to Hunter compared to before when he was a secondary caller. Is there anyone else who chimes in and helps out?
Yeah, well, the biggest voice has been SunPayUs so far, helping with the calling and also bringing initiative, what he wants to do with the op and so on. Of course, at the same time, we have been pushing for Heavy Guard and Matus then as well to have responsibilities, especially from their own positions. So they know what's going on. They know how they can help the team. They know if they need help in their positions and so on. But it's not like we would put the main responsibility on those two. We still want them to also focus on themselves and then them to be able to frag out. And now Nertz coming in, he's also really vocal player because I would say in the past with Malbs in the lineup, it would happen quite often where we have multiple players not giving ideas, and then the responsibility falls on Hunter a lot, and especially when it's crucial moments, then it's like we are trying to call ourselves out of the situation, but instead we should be able to feel out the game a bit more. Like obviously you will have always the call from freeze time and so on, but in the mid rounds, you need to be able to play reactive if the other team is just canceling you in some way, or they are also trying to play the game right. So you need to be able to react on the situations, and that's when you need to be sharp. And this is like one of the reasons also why Nertz is a good fit for us, is that he can bring some of this initiative, some of the like reactive aggression in that way that when he sees a gap, he will use it instantly. He doesn't think twice. And then he's also able to like be vocal about it. He's not gonna be too shy about it.
Was that an issue that you had with Malbs necessarily before that? Obviously on one end, it's the entire team maybe shutting down a little bit because, I'm assuming Heavy God Matteo is probably a little bit quieter as players, but would Malbs be in a position where he had gaps and so and didn't feel confident for taking them in the same way that maybe Nertz does? Do you think that's the case?
Well, I mean, Malbs also he's a player who is willing to take risks. Like that's not the problem. I would say the problem was more like overall the balance of our team, that we had too many players who then would, instead of making like a decision themselves or taking that risk and then giving the info to the team and like kind of building on it, instead of doing that, we would be like a bit stagnant, a bit waiting. Okay, can someone call? And then that someone is Hunter, and then we are relying on the in-game leader. And in that way, I meant like trying to call ourselves out of the situation where like there's gonna be many of these situations where it needs to be more fluid, and we are talking about reactions that will happen in seconds, less of seconds basically. It needs to be faster when you talk about playing the top teams. The slower you do it, then they are able to react back and so on. So I wouldn't say it was like on Malbs, even though the way Malbs is like he's super like I would say just like aggressive player. He's not like this kind of player who will play aggressive, passive, kind of annoying lurk type of player. He's just brute force entry more or less. So it's the overall balance of the team in that way, um, which which gave us some of the struggles in some of these matches. And like you could see it when we are rolling, like the momentum is there, then it's like all good, everything is flowing. But when it gets a bit closer, when it's like there's a potential danger behind the corner, that's like the moments when we need to step up. And then those are also the moments you need the experience. But then of course, like you don't have all the time in the world, so you need to figure out like how can we do the best for the team.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you've obviously mentioned about SunPayUs helping a lot with the calling and everything. When SunPayUs was brought on with you onto the G2 side, was that something that G2 was just themselves saying, hey, we want this SunPayUs duo? Is this something that you sort of pitched them on as well because they were looking for an op at the time Hades was standing in? How did that deal sort of transpire as well?
um I'm not sure exactly. Like in the beginning it wasn't like a package deal, at least, but then it kind of turned out that way. Like G2 needed an oper. They wanted to like structure the team fully again. So then it was it was just like a move that made sense, obviously. Also, like from Heroic side, in that way that SunPayUs being there and me being there, like if they can sell us as a package and they can get a good deal out of it, then it was just how it happened. But not that it was forced by one or the other side, I would say.
Okay, so SunPayUs obviously has a lot of criticism around him as well right now because of his numbers, and it feels like every opper who isn't a top 3 opper has that criticism. So I don't really hold it out too much versus him or anything like that. Is that something that might be exacerbated or like increased because of the fact that he's having to take so many of these calling responsibilities, or am I just making excuses in my head?
I don't think it's about that. Like it's like you said a bit at least that there's like a handful of these operas who are performing at a high level according to statistics as well, and then the rest of them is like, well, not performing. And I think that's just the case in CS2, where overall it's a bit harder, and like the expectations for the opera is not the same as it was in CS:GO. But I think still, yeah, like I wouldn't say it's the calling part that is hurting him. I think on the other side, like when he's calling, when he's feeling the game, and when he also fully understands what's happening around, like around him, around the map, that's when he will play his best. I wouldn't say it's fully like capitalized in this team, like, because especially now, like I said, like a lot of the structure in the system is already there. So like we know what we are doing. And sometimes it is about missing shots. Sometimes it's about mental. Sometimes it's about getting frustrated about that one missed shot, and then it carries on to the next round and so on. So like I would say there's different aspects about it, while saying that overall, like the overall is just different. But I do think like there's still like there's this potential that should be filled, basically, where if he can perform better, obviously it will help the team a lot more as well.
I mean, yeah, it does feel like it's needed because even though there's only a handful, it does now feel like we're getting to the point in CS2 where there's at least 7 or 8 operas who you look at and you're like, hey, you guys can all do pretty well against each other in terms of, there's Monazi, Zaiwu, Molodoy, Torji. There's at least 6 to 8 at this point. So it does feel like that's something that obviously a lot of the fans are looking out towards and hoping will become better. Also want to talk a bit about Kyxsan. Obviously, you've worked with him a lot, and recently Kyxsan removed from Falcons, being replaced by Carrigan. I don't think anyone can really blame him for that sort of replacement coming through. But I do want to talk about your experience with Kyxsan, because Kyxsan with you was in a completely different team, right? Heroic, I'm going to be frank, they're a feeder team. They're not a contender team. They're barely going to be a playoff team in the best situation, no matter what you do. Now he's in the ultimate contender team, not in the sense that they're favorites to win, but they have to win. You talked about the Kyxsan when you had him, maybe compared a little bit to the Kyxsan you see in the Falcons today.
Well, I think like when he was in Heroic, I did like really a lot about like his kind of attitude about the game, like his ability to also take, like, willing to take risks as an individual, but then also with the calls. So like I wouldn't say like he's like, from the outside he might seem a bit shy, a bit quiet, but then I think the attitude inside of the game is different, because I think he doesn't take too much pressure from, well, of course it might be different like now comparing Falcons and Heroic times, but at least also when he came to Heroic, he came from Apex and he didn't have so many like tier 1 tournaments played back in Apex. So I do think like he already showed that he can handle the pressure, he can take risks when it's needed, and he can be a good caller and just have the eye for the game when it comes to details. Also, like, I like the balance that he was giving freedom to the players and then balancing it with his own calls. And he didn't seem like, at least I don't remember like times where he would get frustrated about it too much, where like people are having too much freedom. Like, he would be good at balancing it overall. And I think also, well, all the players that we had back then like liked his way of calling, and it was like a good balance for that team especially. I think there's like some aspects that he can grow in the leadership department, like then we are talking more like the captaincy. and that part, like he's still a young guy and he can still get experience. And I think even in Heroic, like he could have done it more. He could have directed the team more, like especially outside of the game. But I think, well, the experience from Heroic now in Falcons, all of these things will grow him, and I think he will be like a top IGL for the future, like for sure. I think.
So when you say that, hey, you liked how he was willing to take risky calls and maybe take risks as a player, I think the tendency to take risks as a player was still there on Falcons necessarily, but it did feel like maybe some of those risky calls weren't in the same way because obviously, on one side, you've got Nico Monas, you've got Sonic standing behind you and everything. Underneath that kind of crazy pressure, you didn't. I personally didn't think that I saw Kyxsan looking like a free man in a lot of ways. You think I'm accurate? Am I just being a dumb commentator who's just imagining things in my head? What do you think about the Falcon situation?
I do think like it was a completely different balance, because also like the way I see is like Nico will also take a lot of like space and responsibility from the calling department, which is fine. I don't know how it works in the team, but I would see it still as a good combo, like Nico being able to call, especially more on the CT sides, and then Kyxsan as well, like being the guy who he is, he can give some of that space away and not feel necessarily that it's hurting him. Of course, it's like, again, it's a balance thing, and it's impossible to say like how much it shifted one or the other way. But I would see it as a good combo, and like I don't think their problems were structural in that way. That like the system they played with and everything, I think was, to be honest, good. I don't see many issues there. So in that way, like the change of IGL, unless you want some kind of like more leadership, you want more like, let's say, winning culture, all those things, like maybe what Carrigan can bring, can be a good thing. But then on the other side, like the style that Falcons was lately played compared to the style that FaZe has been playing is so different. It's insane. So that making that change, and we will see, I guess, what kind of system will be used in the future. Most likely a mix from the beginning, but how it will work out, I'm not sure. But I don't think that was the problem. Like obviously, some of the other things, like their performance in playoffs and everything, can be something to think about, and maybe that's the issue they want to tackle, and it's the move they make and the risk they take now. So I guess we will see. But yeah, for Kyxsan, the role in this team a lot different from what it was in Heroic, and hard to say from the outside, but it looked like obviously there is a part that like he needs to give space to Nico and Monesi and Kyosuke as well, and it makes sense to give them space. But then how much it hurts his calling, or how much it also puts him into a position, I don't want to call this strat because maybe someone will say it's a bad strat, or someone will give some hindsight comments or something, and how much that hurts your confidence. And like these kind of things, it's impossible to say from the outside, but just by the fact of looking at their games, you can see some of it, that like they want to play it in some ways more of the safe way.
Sonic on Falcons, obviously, it's also, there's been a lot of questions asked about like, hey, Carrigan's coming in, he didn't work that well with Sonic before. Sonic hasn't necessarily been able to do the best with Falcons and everything like that, etc., etc. The obviously very strict style is attributed to him from once upon a time and everything as well. This is a charged question. I understand what I am about to ask. So, and for everyone who's watching, I am obviously putting him in this situation to ask this. So, would you do you think you'd be considered a better coach than Zonic in CS2?
Well, that's also like it's impossible to say, right? Like I think overall, like it doesn't matter CS:GO, CS2, the game is still a lot of the same. Like 5v5, the basic rotation, the basic understanding of how everything works is the same. So I don't think there can be like a case where it's so much different. And I think like, well, also their achievements in Falcons is better than whatever I have achieved in CS2. So that's another thing. But it's
Listen, man, I'm trying to get
I
you a
think
job offer from the Falcons right here. Okay, no, of course not. But
it's just
and
impossible to say.
it's obviously like I said, it's a loaded question. I know there's not going to be a definitive answer. I just think that's one of the conversations that might, who knows, maybe it ends up being started if G2 finds more success. G2's success, though, initially in the early period, I love this headline on HLTV because I'm glad you were honest about it. It's like, I didn't expect to win an event this early. Blast Open London happens. It's an arena event. You've got all the big teams. You're beating Vitality in the best of 5. Everything's working out fine for you. This is 2 months into you joining the lineup. Do you come out of that event sort of thinking in your head like, holy shit, we can be the best, or is this, or even a contender team, or do you come out of that event like, okay, we are having a conversation internally. This is kind of fluky, not a fluke, but maybe we all had the best day possible, and that's not likely to happen again. How do you react to that event afterwards?
I mean, I knew it was early on, and I knew we didn't have like all our things in place yet. I'm not sure if you also can call it honeymoon because it wasn't exactly that early on. On the other hand, so it was a bit weird situation, but I think a lot of things clicked. Our individuals playing well, a lot of things working like what we had back then. But I knew it was early, and I knew it's gonna be tough to repeat. I do think though that we match up quite well against Vitality. So like there's not many teams who can when you look at their matchups, like Vitality is just smashing some teams like completely. But I do think we can work well against their style, even though like I think the record is still way way on their side. But there's quite many close maps as well, and yeah, I think it was like many things clicking happened to in that event, and then afterwards like hasn't been the same case. And then for us against some of the other teams, on the other hand, maybe we are not matching them so well, and then that's hurting us, of course. So yeah, I wouldn't back then, like it's not like I want to call it a fluke, especially back then. But now looking at it, like you can see it's the off event where we perform highly, and then the other events is showing more the consistent level. So it is what it is, but we just need to work on it and get better, basically.
Something you just said reminds me of another thing where you said you've got a good matchup versus Vitality and whatnot. This is obviously just a European conversation, but you were very much around in the time of the Australis like terror that everyone sort of had in 2018 and 19. Obviously, you weren't a part of ENCE back then, but I'm sure you were a fan of them as a Finnish player at the time, and ENCE losing to Australis except for a couple of series and everything. I'm curious about whether you think Vitality of today is better than Astralis of then, not in terms of their record, because I think that is pretty undisputed, but in terms of like how it feels as a player and the quote unquote aura that they have around them.
Like I do think they are better. I think they are the best team ever in CS, like Vitality. About like the feeling and everything, I don't know. I don't really think about that kind of things. And like for me, it doesn't matter to play them. But I think they are the best. And I think it's impressive like what they are able to do. And in MR12 and like CS2, I think it is a more random game. And they are still able to show that it's not random. So I think that's the most impressive thing. Because I think everyone else is a bit more up and down. And Vitality is just consistently there. So that's just super impressive in itself. I do think like they're winning a lot of the close matches as well. But then again, like if you want to be in their position, you need to win those close matches, and they're also winning consistently the close matches. So what can you say really? Like they are showing, like they're proving why they're better than even that Australis team, I would say.
Okay, yeah, just something that I thought about. I've got a soft spot for the Astralis team, and even I would say that Vitality is definitely probably number one. Maybe would become number one by far if they keep on winning the way they do. You know that more than I do. But I want to go back to maybe a little bit about Malbs and everything as well, because obviously, the topic of the day for G2 is the Malbs Nertz swap. Malbs was a player who everyone they got into G2, everyone was saying, oh, this guy is sort of being groomed to be the next Nico for the team. This is what they want from him. And a lot of these like ridiculous things that no one's the next Nico for anyone. But the idea was very clearly on the G2 team from the outside looking in, like, hey, this is an aggressive player. This is a very highly skilled player. This is a player who makes his own plays in a lot of these situations, and he'll be able to learn pretty quickly working with players like Nico for a little while, and then Hunter, and for a while Monacy and whatnot as well. What do you think is held him back in your team? Or is he just not supposed to be that player? Is he supposed to be more like a Flames, who is still an incredible player, but was he just given a responsibility that he shouldn't have? Is this something you felt like you couldn't bring out of him? Can you talk to me more about that dynamic?
I think like he shouldn't be a Nico type of player. And it's probably more like a Flames type of player in that way. He was given too many responsibilities in G2. Like when I joined, when Nico left G2, then already they started to do this where Malbs was getting Nico's positions, all this responsibility, everything. Like it's like, okay, it makes sense in some ways that Nico is out, and then you need someone to replace him and build someone into that role. But it was like that decision, that move was made, and then when I joined, well, we decided to continue on it, and that was like, back then I didn't know exactly how it was, but that was the mistake. Basically, we continued on it for too long, like because it probably went close to 9 months, and there was no like not real progression in that way, and it was too much responsibilities, too many things to try to basically teach, or too many things to try to learn. And then like it's about initiative, it's about handling also the mental side. It's about like if you make a bad call or bad play or whatever, not getting frustrated about it for the next round and then making another call. But it's a lot of those kind of things. And then while we just continued on it, like obviously I wanted to also then see like how is it, can we do something? But then slowly, okay, we understood, okay, this is not gonna work the way we wanted to work. So we started to switch our positions and getting Malbs to some of the anchor positions like Mirage A, Dust Too Long, stuff like this. And I think those positions, they work so much better for him. So I think it was just he was in the wrong positions when I joined. Then we kind of kept some of the structure the old team had, and then it was just it took some time to change it, and that hurt him a bit. And I think if he had been in the anchor positions from the beginning, the team would have been structured in a different way. But since he was already kind of put into those positions and we had started to build on it, and without knowing much of the background, also back then I remember like he wanted to play those positions, so that was the positions we went with. And yeah, that took some time. But I think he is a good player. I think he should be mostly on these anchor positions, like not like the small side anchor or anything like that, but something where he understands what space he needs to control. He understands like how aggressive he can be, but also like what are the limitations. And in those positions he can play good. And then I think on the T side he should be mostly in the back playing aggressive. I think it also benefits him like it would benefit anyone, but if there is an IGL who is going a lot first and then he can be the trade guy, it will obviously benefit everyone's statistics, I think. But it would help him and then to build his confidence. Also, I think it's rare to have these type of players who can be anchors on T side and space takers on anchors on CT and space takers on T. There's not so many players like this, and also who can be good at both. But I think Malbs is one of them. So I think he can be a really good piece to many teams. But I think for our team, it's just something different we needed. So that's just it, I think.
How does the deal come around? Like, the Nertz and Malbs swap. Is this something that took discussion? Is this something where, maybe one party approaches the other and like, hey, and then it just happens really quickly? Like, how did that deal happen?
I think like there's been like, of course, there's always like in some way discussions about potential roster moves and everything, but it doesn't mean it's even close to coming through. It's just you need to be one or two or even more steps ahead instead of just thinking, yeah, this roster is like, even right now, I think all the top teams, they should be in discussions about what kind of roster moves they want to make for the future potentially. It doesn't mean it will happen, but it's just so if something happens, then you're ready. Instead of, oh, now something happened, okay, let's start working on it now. Instead, you need to be some steps ahead. But obviously, what was correct for this move now, or what happened, the timing was just right. Like Liquid struggling, also us not being in the best shape. I think we are still not in the best shape. Like we still need to kind of prove ourselves with Nertz as well. So just both teams being in a position where things are not working the way you want it to work. And then for them also, there being the bonus of, okay, now they're going to be an NA team. They can get into the major, and yeah, they wouldn't have made it to the major being EU. So all these things clicking made the deal possible. I think it's just like it benefits both sides basically. And in that way, it's well, how do you say, just pluses for both.
Was this something you maybe considered in the off season as well after December? Was this something that maybe initially was floated then and materialized now?
Yeah, there was of course like thoughts about it. Not anything deep, I would say, but just like if anything is possible. But yeah, then it ended up happening later on.
So, I mean, you've talked about how you guys still aren't really at the best right now, and looking at things like rankings and whatnot, that is kind of true, right? G2's current rank, HLTV wise, floats between 12 and 14 and everything. It does feel like this is a relative low point for the organization, right? And for the fans of the organization. With Nertz coming in, this is still not the team that it was before, who is making all of those super risky moves and spending all the big money and everything. Can you tell me a reasonable expectation coming into the major that fans can have of your team, of what success looks like? Obviously, there's, hey, we can win the major and whatever, right? But there's also what's sort of that middle ground, good case scenario.
Well, I mean, the playoffs is the first thing for the major. Like anything less is a disappointment. I think even with the old lineup in Budapest, like I think I said the same thing before the tournament. Like we need to get to playoffs. I think it's the same here. Like if we don't get to playoffs, then like what are we even doing here? But at the same time, like the way I feel, at least myself, even just getting to playoffs, it wouldn't. I don't know what kind of satisfaction it would even give. Like probably not that much. So I would say it has to be even deeper. Like it has to be top four, just because that would mean like reaching top four, you need to beat most likely two or three teams that are above you, and then that's where you actually start to go like higher in the rankings. You can show you can beat these teams and so on. So I would say it needs to be somewhere around even top four. And it's putting it like if we are right now somewhere around 11 or 12, so it's putting it high in that way. But I think it just needs to be there, because otherwise what's the point? Like you can't just be like, yeah, we are happy to get to playoffs, even though we need to understand to take it step by step, and we can't just instantly go at the top. But I think like realistically, that's where I want to be. I think that's where the team wants to be. So why not? Like of course we will take these steps. We will try to do it the proper way, like when it comes to the work and when understanding the ranking and how we can get there. But it has to be said, like that's where we want to be. I do think though these three events, or well, including the major, so it's Rivals, Astana, and then the major. These are gonna be the events now that we can assess how we are doing with Nertz, how we are, like some of the changes we are making in positions and in like the structure to fit Nertz in, to give him some of that space, to balance it out with like, well, Hunter, Nertz, and then SunPayUs, they're like calls and everything. We need to assess it in these three events to see how it works out. It would have been nice to use Rio as one of these events, but then we ended up having a stand-in, so we can't really get like the exact data from there that we would like to get. But that's the situation we are in. But yeah, I do think we can do a good run at the major, just because like it's one player change. It's not like we changed everything we have, and then we will have these other tournaments where we can kind of build up to it, and then we are also able to have a boot camp before that. So like I think the chances are there. Then we just need to make sure that we do it, basically.
It does feel like there's vulnerable teams right now as well within the top scene, right? Falcons obviously completely are going to have to change how their team works with Carrigan in the leadership position. Mouz is running this setup where they're not going to have a different lineup for the rather they're going to have a different lineup for the major compared to the events that they're playing, because they've just said, yeah, we're not doing well at the major. That's probably not going to happen over here. So it does feel like it's sort of a good position for G2 to be able to have that top four, maybe even top two run if you get the right bracket and everything. I do want to ask you about one of those teams now, which is Mouz. Obviously, they have been a weird team in the sense that they keep on being really insane, but then they're also kind of, to the fans, they're also really insanely boring because you know they're never going to win. What do you think about these changes coming out for the Mouz camp? Because it does feel like every time I've seen a star player transition into being an IGL, it just fails in general. This feels like desperation to me. Do you think that G2 looking at the new Mouz thinks, all right, this is a team that we're definitely gonna try and get the better of, or is this something where maybe Mouz has the potential to be even better than they were before?
Yeah, I think for us, for sure, like some of these changes, it gives an opportunity. But at the same time, like it will also, for these teams, like Falcons and Mouse, what you mentioned now, like it will relieve some of their pressure, and it can also boost them, like at least on the short term. I think for the long term, it's hard to see this Mouse team like being better than what the old lineup was. Of course, like it's possible, but they were so consistent with getting playoffs, semis, everything. It was missing the last step, and that's why, well, it's a hard change to make, right? But it also feels like a necessary change because you have been like stagnant, so you wanna do something. It's also depends on what perspective you look at it, but just looking at it from like the team's perspective, also from the players' perspective, like of course they wanna win the trophies, and at some point something has to be done, and can be similar from the Or's perspective. So yeah, I think the move most likely okay necessary, but then again, how possible it is to reach the same level, it's tough, I think. It's not that they made exactly like bad changes or something, but it's just to be that consistent, and then maybe some of the roles with the new players, I'm not sure how that will match. It will be like, yeah, the IGL, but then also like an anchor question is there with Infat being out. So it will be interesting to see. But then, of course, like this rest of the season for Mouse, also using like different lineup for what was it, Atlanta, Shanghai, and then the major, like Roland being there for the major, that kind of relieves the pressure of everything. And they still have good players, and they have like the old system and everything, and they know each other. So there is like a potential they will do something good also in some of these events, like something unexpected. So yeah, what can you say? It's interesting to see. I do think also like overall this roster changes happening now, like with Falcons face, then Mouse, and then with like even us and Liquid and everything. I think it kind of speaks for the fact that like this last player break, there was probably more and more teams wanting to do changes, which didn't happen. And then now some of like the moves are starting to happen before the major. Some maybe will happen more after the major, like, and then it comes around to the financials, I think, where there's not so many orgs in the position to do these changes, like when they, when they would want exactly. And then it might happen in some more weird times, but it is what it is with the scene.
Right. So I know you don't have much more time, so I just did want to talk to you about one more player that you've worked with in the past, who looked really good when you were working with him, and then nowadays is maybe struggling a little bit more. It's Denier. Here coming out of Heroic, I mean, like you always know a player is really good, or at least eye test wise, when all of the analysts in the scene and like the talent scene are all going like, hey, yeah, you guys got to watch out for this guy. This guy's insane, even when he hasn't done it on land necessarily. And on Heroic, Denier comes out, he's his breakout prospect, goes to Spirit, and it's been okay. It's not been bad. but it's been okay, and okay doesn't seem good enough when you've got Donk and Shiro sort of next to you. What was he like when you were playing with
Um, well, when we got him, like, well, the first thing that comes to mind is that he didn't know English basically.
him?
So that was interesting, but he learned it, to be honest, really fast. And like the thing was, he was a vocal player already before he joined us. When I talked to some people like who coached him and some like people around him, he was a vocal player, like positive player, everything. But I think in the start of Heroic, some of it was hard to show because of like not knowing English, some cultural differences and everything. But the later we got with the Heroic lineup, the more he was able to take that role, being a vocal player, creating space for the team, like also being a positive guy, like overall of the server, and just a really good, like a good player to have in your team, basically. I think in Spirit, some of his space is more limited than what it was in Heroic. Um, which like I knew it when the move would happen, like it wouldn't be exactly same what it was in Heroic because like the system is fully different. And it's gonna be either that they need to change their system or they will take him and slot him into someone's position. So that's the challenge I see in a lot of interviews, like where they say maybe they're trying to change something, but I'm not seeing so many big changes. So it's hard to say what they're exactly doing. Like I need to say one thing though. Like I think was the start of this season when we were practicing them. I think like there was some things that was obviously new. But then again, practice is also different from official. And then when you look at them in officials, it's yeah. I think it's still a lot of the same that it was before. So I think some part is about like changing their structure to fit him better. Some part is also on him then adapting to the structure as well. It's always gonna be like that, but I do agree. Like looking at their players, I think they should be performing better, basically.
Last question, then I will let you go. So you are a talent scout in reputation. You've raised so many of these incredible players and whatnot. And I came into the off season before the last one, 2025, second season of the year. I came into it the most frustrated I have ever been because for me, the NaVi Junior lineup, the former NaVi Junior lineup, were all free agents and signed to foot, were the most obvious, like, hey, these guys are really, really good. What do you think about the foot team? Did you think were you thinking from beforehand that hey, yeah, this is a team which is going to have like its talents taken away from it or so, or were there players that maybe you had in mind to try and talk to or whatever? Can you talk to me a bit about this team?
Well, the players are really good, like aggressive players. Many of them willing to basically willing to sacrifice, take space, and but it's not really even sacrificing when all of them are taking space at the same time, and that's what makes it a bit annoying to play against them because they can be like unpredictable in that way. And yeah, like people are saying, they're shooting hard. So individually, really talented. It's not like there's one clear star players. I think, yeah, well, basically all of them are people that other teams could pick up, which is an interesting scenario. You don't see it often. I'm not sure if have you ever seen an academy team where you think like all 5 players can be potential pickups, and that's what obviously then makes them a good team and makes them so that they are able to play against the best teams. When you have like 5 players, it's not just one guy carrying you or 2 guys carrying you. So it's a good balance in that team. I think there's a part where they're overhyped right now, though. Like, sure they won Bucharest, which was like a bit lower tier
They won quite
tournament
proudly here
in
too,
the
yeah.
teams. Yeah, like it's still like I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but like this was a good achievement by them, and they are playing good CS. But I don't think like they are top 5 or anything. Like top 10 they are for sure, but top 5 is a reach, and I feel like sometimes people think they are top 5, and I think they need to prove themselves a bit more. Just showing it in the next tournaments, but they have the ability to be there. I just think they're not there yet, at least. And then, of course, the interesting part for them is that there will be teams asking for their players, and can they stick together, or that's it. That we will see. I think after the major we will see that, like what happens then.
All right. Saw, thank you so much. This has been Saw from G2. Go check him out on socials. He's got more followers than I do, so me plugging him really doesn't matter. Thank you all for tuning in. See you guys next time.